Tired of the party already?
I was just looking at the roses.
Rough day at the office?
They are just beautiful.
They are beautiful.
Yes, they are.
They're not for sale.
I know.
I have been arranging other people's most important days for so long that I forgot to arrange one of my own. That is not a metaphor. That is a tax return. Elara Novick, 27, sole proprietor. Bloom and Thorn Floristry, Brooklyn, New York. Specialization, weddings, funerals, and the specific category of event where someone else's life is the centerpiece and mine is the delivery van. Revenue, enough. Happiness, pending. Thorns removed from fingers this week, 47. Hours slept in the last 3 days, 11. My sister Daphne is getting married tomorrow, in this hotel. The Marquis, a building made of marble, and money, and the kind of hush that only exists in places where the cheapest glass of wine costs more than my electric bill. I am here because I am doing the flowers, not as a gift, not as a contribution, as an expectation, the kind that was never spoken aloud because it didn't need to be. Daphne is getting married. Elara does flowers. The sky is blue. Water is wet. The plus-size sister makes the arrangements. 1,200 stems, 43 centerpieces, 6 garland installations, 416 individual blooms, wired into a floral arch that will frame my sister's face in photographs that will hang on my mother's wall for the next 30 years. I have been in this service corridor since 8 a.m. My knees hurt. My fingers are bleeding in 4 places. Because I am working with David Austin roses, and David Austins have thorns that are personal, small, curved, hidden under the petal line, the kind that don't announce themselves until they're already in your skin. It was 11 p.m. I was sitting on an overturned bucket with a glass of House Sauvignon Blanc that a sympathetic bartender had poured me without charge, the service industry solidarity of one worker watching another worker fall apart, and I was not crying, because I do not cry at weddings, not even the ones I'm not invited to, as a guest. That is when he stopped. I didn't see him at first. I heard him. The corridor went quiet, the way a room goes quiet when the air pressure changes, and I looked up, and there was a man, standing at the entrance to the service corridor, one hand on the doorframe, not looking at me, looking at the flowers. He was not supposed to be in the service corridor. Service corridors are for staff, deliveries, and women sitting on flower buckets, having a controlled emotional event. They are not for men in black cashmere coats that cost more than my monthly rent, with shoulders that made the corridor feel like a hallway in a doll's house. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the David Austins, the shell pink ones, Kira. The variety is called Bred in Shropshire, 3-week bloom window in June, fragrance like old rose, and almond, and something underneath that smells like the word memory would smell if words had scent. That's a David Austin, I said, because when I am exhausted and slightly wine-loose, and a stranger is looking at my roses, I default to the thing I know. Shell pink. Kira. It only blooms for 3 weeks in June. He was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, my mother grew those. 4 words, and the way he said them, low, careful, the voice of a man handling a sentence, the way I handle a stem with hidden thorns, told me that his mother was not growing them anymore. She had good taste, I said. She was a florist. Then she had great taste. The corner of his mouth moved, not a smile, the architecture of a smile, in a man who has not fully committed to the construction. He walked into the corridor. He looked at the buckets, the peonies, the ranunculus, the eucalyptus, the garden roses in blush and cream, and the specific dusty pink that Daphne chose after 3 hours of deliberation, and 14 color swatches that I held up to natural light in my shop, while my sister FaceTimed from a nail salon. "You're doing the wedding," he said, not a question. "I'm doing the wedding." The Novick Ashford wedding. Tomorrow. Grand ballroom. You know the booking. I own the hotel. I looked at him. I looked at the wine glass. I looked at the corridor full of 1,200 stems that I had been arranging alone for 15 hours in a building owned by a man who was standing 6 feet from me, smelling like cedar and winter and the specific, expensive quiet of a person who does not need to announce himself because the building already knows. Well, I said, your service corridor is excellent, very well lit. The buckets drain properly, 9 out of 10. What's the missing point? The wine could be better. He almost laughed. The sound was quiet. Not a laugh, but the place where a laugh lives. In a man who has decided that laughter is an expense he doesn't authorize frequently. And then, because I was exhausted, because I was sitting on a bucket surrounded by someone else's wedding flowers, because tomorrow I would sit at the family table alone, while my mother asked, "When is your turn for the 37th time?" and my aunt commented on my neckline, and my sister floated through a room I had built for her. Without saying thank you, I said the most ridiculous sentence of my life. My sister's getting married tomorrow, in your hotel. I did all the flowers. I'll be sitting alone at the family table, while everyone asks me when my turn is. I paused. I don't suppose you'd want to sit next to me and pretend to be someone who chose me. He looked at me. The hazel gold eyes, warm, but with edges, the color of amber with something trapped inside it. I don't pretend, he said. That's a no then. That's a yes, but I won't be pretending. Underscore. Let me tell you about the arrangement, before the arrangement. I am 5'4". I am a size 16. I have my grandmother's hands, wide palms, strong fingers, the kind of hands that were built to hold stems, and soil, and scissors, and the specific weight of a peony head that droops if you cut it at the wrong angle. My grandmother, Nana Katya, ran a flower shop in Brighton Beach for 40 years. She smelled like soil and lemon verbena and the cold salt air that came off the boardwalk in winter. She taught me that every flower has a language, that roses mean love, but the color changes the sentence. Red is passion, white is purity. Yellow is friendship, and the shell pink David Austin means, I choose you, gently, with intention. She taught me that lavender means devotion, that rosemary means remembrance, that a boutonnière, the single flower pinned to a man's lapel, is the most intimate arrangement in a wedding, because it goes directly over the heart, and the bride chooses it, and the groom wears it, and nobody in the room notices it, except the two people who know what it means. She taught me, Solnishko, a woman who arranges everyone else's flowers, and never picks her own, is not generous. She is hiding. Pick your own flowers. I have not picked my own flowers. I have arranged Daphne's prom corsage, Daphne's graduation party, Daphne's engagement dinner, and now Daphne's wedding, 1,200 stems, 43 centerpieces, a ceremony arch, and a bridal bouquet that took me 6 hours to construct, because Daphne wanted peonies and David Austins and ranunculus and eucalyptus, and the specific dusty pink that exists in a 2-day window between blush and mauve. And if you cut the stems at the wrong hour, the color shifts. And I cut them at 4 a.m. to get it right. Daphne is not cruel. She is central. There is a difference. Cruelty requires intention, but centrality is just gravity. My sister is the sun. I am the planet. Nobody asks the planet how it feels about the orbit. She is 30. She is thin. She is getting married to a man named Julian Ashford, who works in finance, and calls me L, and has never asked what kind of flowers I like. My mother, Helen, calls twice a week, once to check on the flowers, once to ask when my turn is. My Aunt Patricia comments on my neckline. My family loves me. I am certain of this. They love me the way you love the person who sets the table, sincerely, habitually, without ever wondering who set a place for her, under her, and score. He gave me his name at midnight, in the service corridor. after I'd agreed to let a stranger who owned the hotel attend my sister's wedding as my date. Cassian, he said. Cassian Marchetti. I didn't recognize the name. I don't read the kind of newspapers that print names like his. I read gardening catalogs and floral supply invoices and the backs of seed packets. But the way the bartender, the sympathetic one, the one who'd given me the free wine, went pale when Cassian walked past the bar, told me that the name Marchetti meant something in this building, that bloom and thorn floristry did not prepare me for. Ilara, I said. Ilara Novick. I own a flower shop in Brooklyn, and I am currently responsible for 1,200 stems that need to be in the grand ballroom by 7 a.m. You need help. I need sleep. I can arrange sleep. The penthouse is available. I'm not going to your penthouse, Mr. Marchetti. It has 3 bedrooms, a concierge, and a door that locks from the inside. I'll be on a different floor. He paused. You have thorn cuts on 4 fingers. You've been here since 8 a.m. You're sitting on a bucket. Let me do the one thing I can do, which is give you a room in a building I own, so you can sleep before you arrange your sister's wedding. I looked at him. I looked at the bucket. I looked at the thorn cuts. Is the wine better upstairs? Considerably. I took the penthouse. I slept in a bed that could have held 4 of me. I set an alarm for 5 a.m., and I was in the grand ballroom by 6. And every centerpiece was placed, and every garland was hung, and the ceremony arch was perfect, the David Austin's opening on schedule, the peonies full but not drooping, the eucalyptus catching the light like silver, and at 9 a.m. I sat in the hotel suite that I should not have had access to, and I made a boutonniere that I had not planned to make. Lavender, French, the thin purple sprig that means devotion, not passion, not desire, but the quieter thing, the daily thing, the showing up thing. Rosemary, the woody herb that means remembrance, not grief, not loss, but the act of holding someone in your memory, the way you hold a stem, carefully, with the knowledge that it matters. I bound them with ivory silk ribbon. I wrote a card, lavender, devotion, rosemary, remembrance. And when Cassian Marchetti arrived at the suite at 10 a.m., in a suit so dark it looked like a decision, shoulders that made the door frame reconsider its dimensions, I pinned it to his lapel, my fingers on his chest. 1 pin, 2 seconds. The lavender against the charcoal wool, his heartbeat underneath, slow, steady, the heartbeat of a man whose body runs at a frequency designed to intimidate. But whose eyes, when I looked up, were the color of honey, with something breaking inside it. My mother would have liked you, he said, quietly. The sentence of a man who does not say his mother's name in buildings, and has just said it in a sentence that includes you. She grew, David Austin's. She grew everything. She was a florist before she married my father. She said flowers were the only honest language. They can't lie. They bloom, or they don't. Nana Katya said the same thing. Who is Nana Katya? The woman who taught me everything. She ran a shop in Brighton Beach for 40 years. She's gone now, but she's in every arrangement I make. Every stem I cut is cut the way she showed me, angled, underwater, with the blade away from the node. He looked at the boutonniere on his lapel. He touched it once, with 1 finger, not adjusting, just confirming. The way you touch a new scar, gently, to see if it still hurts. Lavender, he said. Devotion, rosemary, remembrance. You gave me devotion and remembrance. I gave you a flower, Mr. Marchetti. Don't read into it. I don't read, he said, but I listen. And your flowers are saying something your mouth won't. Underscore. The wedding was beautiful. Of course it was. I made it beautiful. I have been making things beautiful for other people my entire life. It is the core competency of the planet, who orbits the sun. Daphne floated down the aisle in a dress that cost $4,000, and a bouquet that I wired stem by stem at 4 a.m., and she was radiant, and Julian cried, and my mother cried, and Aunt Patricia dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief and said, "Thank God," which could have meant anything. but probably meant at least one of them is settled. I sat at the family table. I was not in the back row, but I was at the edge, the seat that is technically family, but functionally adjacent, the seat that says we love you, but we didn't plan the table around you. Cassian sat beside me. He arrived at the ceremony at the last moment, walked in, and the room adjusted the way rooms adjust when something enters that is heavier than the architecture expected. The maitre d' changed posture. 2 waiters rerouted. The father of the groom looked up from his phone and went very still. Nobody said anything. He sat beside me, and he folded his hands, and he watched the ceremony the way I imagine he watches everything, with the patient, structural attention of a man who is assessing load-bearing capacity. My mother saw him during the processional. I know this because her eyes did the thing that mothers' eyes do when their single daughter arrives at a family wedding with a man whose shoulders have their own postcode. They widened, then narrowed, then widened again, performing the 3-act play of shock, assessment, cautious optimism, in under 4 seconds. After the ceremony, at the table, the questions began. Elara, who is your friend? My mother. Friend was doing a lot of structural work in that sentence. Cassian. He's a friend. What does Cassian do? Cassian answered before I could. I manage properties. His voice was level. His face was composed. He was telling the truth, the way a glacier is technically water. How did you meet? She was arranging flowers in my building, he said. At midnight, alone. She'd been working for 15 hours. No one had brought her dinner. No one had asked if she needed help. I stopped because the roses smelled like my mother's garden, and I stayed because the woman cutting them was doing it with the kind of care that should not be invisible. The table went quiet. The specific quiet of a family that has just been told, by a stranger, the thing they should have noticed themselves. Well, Aunt Patricia said, recovering. Elara, you look lovely, but have you thought about the neckline? It might be more flattering if... The neckline is exactly where I want it, Aunt Patricia. Cassian's hand moved under the table, not to my hand, to the back of my chair. His fingers rested on the wood behind my shoulders, not touching me, touching the space I occupied, claiming the perimeter without crossing the border, and the message was not for me. It was for every person at that table who had spent 27 years looking at Elara Novick and seeing the arrangements instead of the arranger. During the reception, my mother found Cassian at the bar. I know this because I was adjusting the head table garland. A rose had dropped, the way David Austin's do when the room temperature exceeds 72. And I couldn't leave it, because the arrangement is the arrangement, and the arrangement does not droop. And I saw them in the bar mirror, my mother, 5'2", holding a glass of champagne, looking up at 6'3" of Cassian Marchetti, like a woman attempting to assess a mountain using a tape measure. Who are you, really? My mother asked. I could read her lips in the mirror. I'm the man your daughter gave flowers to, Cassian said. My mother processed this. She gives everyone flowers. It's what she does. She gave me lavender and rosemary, devotion and remembrance. On a boutonniere that she made in a hotel suite at 9 a.m., with hands that had thorn cuts from working all night to make your other daughter's wedding the most beautiful room I've ever seen. He paused. She did not give everyone flowers. She gave everyone else arrangements. She gave me meaning. My mother was quiet, the specific quiet of a woman who has just been handed information she should have gathered herself. She's special, my mother said. I know. No, you don't know. Not yet. She takes care of everything. She has, since she was 12, since her grandmother, since Katya died. She took over. The shop, the holidays, the birthdays, everything. And my mother's voice broke. In the bar mirror, I saw her chin tremble. We forgot to take care of her. Then start, Cassian said, because I won't be the only one who sees her. The guests danced. The cake was cut, the toasts were made, Julian's best man said something about destiny, and Daphne's maid of honor said something about sisterhood, and neither of them mentioned the woman who built the room they were standing in. Daphne found me at the garland. "Elle, the flowers are insane." "You're amazing." She hugged me. She smelled like champagne, and joy by Dior, and the specific happiness of a woman who has just married a man who adores her. She was sincere. She is always sincere. Sincerity and blindness are not opposites. They are neighbors. "Thank you, Daphne. Who's the guy?" "Cassian. Elle. He's intense." She lowered her voice. "Where did you find him?" "In your service corridor. Smelling roses." She laughed. She drifted back to Julian. The orbit continued. The sun at the center, the planet at the edge. At 11 p.m., the ballroom was nearly empty. The candles were low. The flowers were at their peak, fully open. The David Austins releasing their final fragrance. The peonies heavy. The eucalyptus silver in the dying light. In 6 hours, a crew would come and dismantle everything. The garlands would come down. The centerpieces would be boxed. The arch would be dismantled, stem by stem. By morning, the room would be empty, and the evidence that I had spent 3 weeks building the most beautiful space I had ever created would be gone. I stood under the arch. I touched a rose, shell pink, Kira. 3 weeks in June. I heard him before I saw him. Not his footsteps, his silence. The specific, weighted quiet of a man who enters a room the way weather enters a valley, by changing the pressure. You made all of this, not a question. Cassian Marchetti stood behind me, boutonniere still on his lapel, and he said the 4 words that no one, not my mother, not my sister, not Julian, not Aunt Patricia, not a single person in a room of 140 guests had said to me all night. You made all of this. Not the flowers are beautiful, not the arrangements are lovely, not great job, Elle. You made all of this. My throat closed. My eyes did the thing I don't allow. I pressed my fingertips against the arch, the stem, the wire, the ribbon I had tied at 6 a.m. with hands that were shaking from exhaustion and not enough coffee, and I breathed. Yes, I said. I did. When I was 23, he said, my mother died. Car accident. Winter. Icy road. And after she died, I sealed everything. Her garden, her flowers, her shop. I told myself that the room was closed, that vulnerability was a door I couldn't afford to open. He touched the boutonniere, gently, the way he had in the suite, and then I walked into a service corridor because I smelled David Austin's, and there was a woman sitting on a bucket with thorn cuts on her fingers and bad wine in her glass, and she knew the name of the rose, and she knew the bloom window. And he stopped. She spoke my mother's language. Flowers, I said. Flowers. Arrangement. The act of making something beautiful for someone else, and not expecting anyone to notice. He looked at the arch. My mother did that. For years. She made my father's world beautiful. And he built his world on top of hers. And he never once said you made all of this. He paused. I won't make his mistake. You barely know me. I know that you work until midnight and sleep 4 hours and cut stems at 4 a.m. and put thorns in your own skin to make someone else's day perfect. I know that you carried 1,200 stems into my building, and no one carried a single one for you. I know that your grandmother taught you that lavender means devotion, and you pinned devotion to a stranger's chest because he mentioned his mother's roses. He reached into his jacket. He pulled out a card, not a business card, a card from the boutonniere box, the one I'd written. Lavender, devotion, rosemary, remembrance. I kept it, he said. It's just a card. It's the first flower anyone has given me in 12 years. He held my gaze. I told you I don't pretend. This is not pretending. This is a man standing in a room full of flowers that a woman made, telling her that the most beautiful thing in this room is not the arrangement. It's the arranger. A. _. He walked me to the balcony. Not the public terrace. His balcony. The one attached to the floor he lives on when he's in this building. The one that looks over the city the way a man who owns parts of it looks at it, with responsibility, not admiration. I was holding a David Austin. I had taken it from the arch. One bloom, shell pink, at its peak, 3 hours from drooping. My grandmother taught me, never let the last bloom die on the vine. Take it home, put it in water, let it finish in your kitchen, where someone will see it. Your grandmother, Cassian said. Katya, Nana Katya. Yes. What would she say about tonight? She would say, I finally picked my own flower. I looked at the rose. She told me once. I was 15. Daphne had just won prom queen, and I was in the shop making her corsage. She took my face in her hands and said, Solnishko, a woman who arranges everyone else's flowers and never picks her own, is not generous. She is hiding. Pick your own flowers. Solnishko. Little son. It's Ukrainian. Little son. He repeated it the way he'd repeated lavender and rosemary, learning the vocabulary of a language he was choosing to enter. You're not little. I know. And you're not hiding. Not anymore. No. I looked at him. Not anymore. Underscore. I did not sleep in the penthouse. I slept in my own room, the service rate room on the 4th floor that Daphne's wedding planner booked for the vendor. I slept in the narrow bed with the David Austin in a water glass on the nightstand, and the boutonniere card beside it, and I dreamed about my grandmother's shop, and the smell of soil and lemon verbena, and the sound of scissors cutting stems at 5 a.m. In the morning, I packed the leftover stems into a box. I changed into my own clothes. I walked through the lobby, and the concierge nodded at me, not the nod of a staff member acknowledging a vendor, but the nod of a person who has been told, by someone they take very seriously, to treat this woman as if the building belongs to her. Cassian was at the car, black coat, coffee. The boutonniere, still. On his lapel, 20 hours later. You're still wearing it, I said. It hasn't finished speaking. It's lavender and rosemary. It said, devotion and remembrance. Then I'm still listening. He opened the car door. Let me drive you to Brooklyn. You don't drive. You have people who drive. Today I drive. Underscore. He drove me to Brooklyn, in a car that cost more than my building, through streets that were Sunday quiet. He did not play music. He did not talk about the wedding. He asked about the shop, the square footage, the supplier chain, the bloom calendar, the refrigeration, the overhead. He asked the way a man asks who is not making conversation, but is making calculations. And the calculations are not financial. They are architectural. He is building a room in his life that has space for a flower shop. He walked me inside. He stood in the doorway of Bloom and Thorn, the shop my grandmother opened, the shop I inherited, the shop that smells like soil and roses and the cold water mineral scent of stems that have been cut under running water. And his face did something I had never seen on a man who owns hotels and wears cashmere and moves through the world like weather. He softened, not weakened, softened, the way a stem softens when you put it in water, not breaking, not bending, but allowing the thing it's made of to do the thing it was always supposed to do. This is your mother's language, I said. It was. It still is. Languages don't die when the speaker dies. They just need someone to keep speaking them. I placed the bouquet on the counter. My bouquet, the first arrangement I had made for myself. A mason jar. Lavender, rosemary, one David Austin rose, shell pink, Kira, cut at the correct angle, underwater. Blade away from the node. Nana Katya's method. Nana Katya's language. Nana Katya's granddaughter, finally picking her own flower. Cassian looked at the bouquet. He looked at the photograph of Nana Katya on the wall. He looked at me. I don't pretend, he said, for the third time, and I don't arrange. I'm not good at it. I don't know which bloom goes where. I don't know the language. I can't tell a peony from a ranunculus. But I know what it looks like when someone puts their entire self into a room, and no one says thank you. I watched my mother do it for 20 years. He took the boutonniere from his lapel. He set it on the counter beside my bouquet, the lavender and rosemary, wilted now, 20 hours old, but still holding the shape I gave it, still pinned, still speaking. "Teach me," he said. "The language. It takes years. I have years. I'm not going to tell you what years became. Not yet. That's for next time. But I'll tell you this. There is a boutonniere pressed in a book on my nightstand. Lavender and rosemary, dried now, flattened between the pages of Nana Katya's copy of The Meaning of Flowers that she kept behind the register for 40 years. And every morning, when I open the shop at 6 a.m. and cut the first stems of the day, there are 2 coffees on the counter. One is mine. One is for the man who stops by at 7, not because he needs flowers, but because the shop smells like his mother's garden, and the woman who runs it speaks a language he is learning. And my mother called last week. Not about the flowers, not about when it's my turn. She said, "Elara, I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner. You made all of it. Every room I've ever walked into that was beautiful, you made it, and I should have told you." She's learning too. If you are the woman who arranges, the woman who makes the corsage, and hangs the garland, and cuts the stems at 4 a.m., and sits at the edge of the table, and never hears the words, "You made all of this. I made this for you." Hit subscribe. Share this with the woman who has been everyone's florist and no one's bouquet. And tell me, did you pick stay or walk away? Because Nana Katya would have picked stay. She would have pinned the lavender to his lapel, and she would have said, "Solnishko, you finally picked your own flower." New story every week. Hit the bell. And if you want to know what Cassian learned first, the peonies or the patience, you'll have to come back for that.